Okay, I'll see how this goes. Good morning, everybody. So, evolution is this thing that they keep on trying to push on people and say it exists. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a total failure. Hasn't ever proved anything. It delays scientific advancement, hinders scientific advancement, and it has no basis whatsoever. So, like abiogenesis, they'll say, "Okay, we'll give you abiogenesis that it can't happen," but evolution over a period of time happens over a period of millions of years, supposedly. The problem is that there's no mechanism for evolution, and the fossil record, what we have of fossils, supports that there is no evolution. People think, so what about the fossils? What about them? You go to the Cambrian explosion, you have everything is its own tree. Nothing before it, nothing after it. Every single animal that you find in the Cambrian explosion is fully formed, and most of which is extinct today. So it had nothing before it, nothing after it. Same thing with everything else. Everything else is its own tree. Not sure if people, excuse me, people realize that everything else is its own family tree as well. A grasshopper is its own family tree. A beetle is its own family tree. Now, there could be different kinds among those, like spiders, for example. There could be different kinds of spiders originally. I mean, there's a scorpion and a spider. There's a there's a daddy long leg and a spider. They say daddy long legs aren't really spiders, but they're all eight legged. So they could have different kinds of spiders too, for that matter. But there's one spider family tree. I mean, if if that, maybe there's three family spider trees or more. Okay, so the same thing with everything else. Like grasshoppers, you have katydids, maybe that's another kind. You have crickets, maybe that's another kind. But they're all grasshopper um, structures, basically. Of course, with differences. Could be the same thing as between an ape and a gorilla, a chimp. A chimp, a gorilla, and an orangutan. They could be all different kinds because they have a lot of things unique to themselves that that the other one doesn't have. In common only with themselves. They could be their own family tree: orangutan tree, a gorilla tree, and a chimp tree. Could be three different trees. Of course, then you have lemurs. Then you have monkeys without tails. You have monkeys with tails. They could be all their own tree. But there's only one tree. You can't. I mean, they can't diversify. They don't have anything diversifying into anything else. So, like there's so many different kinds of trees. There's the cicada or leafhopper kind. You know, cicadas aren't. They're not grasshoppers. They're not crickets. They're not spiders. They're not butterflies. Butterflies are their own tree. Then again, you have butterflies and moths, two different things. You know, completely, entirely different from each other, just like the cricket and the grasshopper and the katydid. But they're basically the same structure. Now, could it be that they have a common ancestor, or is it that they have a common designer? That's the question. Because they're all their own tree. They can't diversify into anything other thing. Every time a locust goes on a rampage, and a locust is a grasshopper, that's all it is, grasshopper, it always morphs into a locust. So it's a green grasshopper that morphs into a locust, right? So it never morphs into anything else. I mean, it's morphing, it's changing, it's altering, it's varying wildly, out of control, but it always morphs into a locust and never morphs into anything else from a grasshopper, from a green grasshopper. So we could see by that there's a limit to the capability of what is in a genome, particular given genome. So each one is its own family tree. Of course, you have the moths and the butterflies. The moths rest with their wings down, and they have characteristics of their own, which are different from the butterfly. Butterflies rest with their wings up, and they're, totally different nature, everything completely different. But even if they were from the same tree, it's just one tree, probably two trees, separate trees. Same thing with the cats. You have all the different cats, but it's one tree. You even have cats that can turn their back feet around backwards so they can climb down, up and down trees. Good morning, Christian Carpenter. Morning. So maybe that's a different kind, right? Maybe there's other kinds of cats that are different kinds of cats, but there's a lot of variation of one tree. You know, it's like, do people might not even know how many variations there are of grasshoppers, different kinds of grasshoppers, or how many variations there are of leafhopper, katydids, cicadas. There's a lot of variation there, but it's all the same family tree, if that. There's a lot of variations, a lot of different kinds of spiders. There's jumping spiders. Jumping spider could be its own family tree, you know, and maybe it's from the same family tree, but it's still only one family tree. It can't be anything else. So you have the scorpion that has a stinger on the tail, and the stingray has a stinger on the tail too. So do they belong to this family tree? Do they have a common ancestor, or do they have a common designer? That's the question. I would suggest they have a common designer because they are their own family tree. They can't be anything else. They don't have genetic programming to be what they are. They can't be anything else. So you can look at everything that exists, mammoths and elephants. They have their own family tree. It's a single family tree. They can't be anything else other than a mammoth or an elephant, either with one tusk, two tusks, funny jaws, or whatever. They can only be a mammoth or an elephant. They can't be anything else. Same thing with everything. The dinosaur. Sauropod can only be a sauropod. You have lots of different kinds of sauropods, huge variety, especially before the flood. There's more variety from before the flood than there is after the flood. But there's one family tree. It can't be anything else. Spinosaurus, or what they call spinosaurids. They have a huge variety of spinosaurids that swim in the sea and walk on back legs, stand upright, and look down, just like Leviathan. And everything runs. You know, huge variety, one family tree. It can't be anything else. Might argue they could be a crocodile, but maybe a crocodile is a different kind, right? Maybe the crocodile isn't doesn't even belong to the same family tree. Maybe it's or maybe it is a variation from way before the flood or whatever. Who knows? But even another thing to note is the two kinds of every animal that were brought onto the ark were not the entire gene pool. There were two representatives from every kind, every different kind. And they obviously were not representative of the entire gene pool of the original kind. So even the animals on the ark could not be the original kind because they had already had some variation or some diversification or specification or specialization of some kind, or others of their kind had other specializations, without a doubt. So they're already not the original kind that was created. It's a sliver of the original kind that was created, but it's one family tree of each different kind. And of course, if you were to try to get things to have a common ancestor, which the fossil record doesn't support, because fossil record supports the same thing we see today. Everything is its own kind. Nothing can be anything else. But if there was millions of years, which there isn't millions of years, which is another thing. Millions of years isn't enough, anyways, to get all the different kinds, from an original genome. An original genome would have had to have all the, still top down, would have had to have all the original information and of everything on down the line, and it would just have to drop information to be this thing, that thing, and the other thing. But that would be some genome. That would be, you know, one genome for everything. That wouldn't even make sense. But that's not what the fossil record shows. The fossil record shows that everything is its own kind, its own family tree, unconnected from anything else, like the Cambrian explosion, like everything else we see in the world. Every other creature is its own kind. We have lots of rodents, but they're all rodents. We have lots of marsupials, but they're marsupials, and they're probably different original kinds of marsupials as well. But even so, they can't be anything else other than a marsupial. It's not possible. Reptiles can't be anything other than a reptile. Mammals didn't originate from a reptile. That's the belief, but that's not what the fossil record shows. And we only have 5,000 years or 6,000 years from the beginning of history anyway. And that's what haplogroup genetic studies show as well. There is no ancient civilization that wasn't first mentioned in the Bible. And that's enough to make people quiet because we have the evidence. They don't have the evidence. They don't have any evidence. All they have is speculation. We have evidence of 5,000 years or less since Noah. They don't have evidence. All they have is all they can say is Sumerians. Sumerians. Sumerians were already a mixture of different people. They weren't. The Sumerians weren't the original um, civilization. It was a conglomeration. Sumeria was a conglomeration already of different people, and even in the extra biblical records, you have Nimrod and Abraham that are not the same original from the same original family, and they're in Samaria. They're in Ur of the Chaldees, or which is land of Shinar, Mesopotamia. So we have all the evidence from the beginning. We have the evidence outside the fossil records, the geology of the global flood, the extreme sediment deposits. They call them mega sequences all around the world that span globes, mega sequences of sediment layers, water deposited sediment layers. Then you have the runoff layers on top of the sediment layers that were buried everything. And the runoff layers, then they have other animals as well, which some of them are more recent, could be more recent anyway. But which is another thing. But there is definitely not any more time than 5,000 years or 6,000 years if you go back to the creation. And the global flood is a snapshot in history, human history, and it's a snapshot of what the world was like before creation. Hello, Star Knight. So before the flood, we know the world was very different than it is today. We know that it was able to support, vast amounts of fish in the sea and all different kinds of wildlife in the swamp areas and other areas. And there was different ecosystems in different places for different animals, but it was a completely different world. It was a world that was totally destroyed and annihilated by the global flood, and we're the survivors because all of our Y chromosomes go back to the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah that can be named, that were named for us. So we have the names of the progenitors of every ancient civilization that there ever was or that ever is today. And if you give me your Y chromosome, I can tell you the name of your progenitor, which branch of the family, the human family tree that you belong to. And you can't be anybody else. It's not a if and or maybe. It's absolute. If you have a QY chromosome, your ancestor is Madai. If you have a CY chromosome, your ancestor is Nimrod. If you have an R1b, Southern European Y chromosome, your ancestor is Riphath, the son of Gomer. If you have an R1A, your ancestor is Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer. The R2 is Togarma, the son of Gomer. You know, Tubal was in Italy, could be the Neanderthals, at least partially. Mr. Lizard, how you doing? Wasn't it only a few landlocked seas which apparently had a ton of biomass, and all the sea animals were larger and were all vegan? Yeah, there. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of biomass. That's a good point. And the original creation, from what it seems, is that everything was originally. But this is at the time of creation, of course. It was originally very vegetarian, and the only time that the animals started eating each other was after the fall of Adam and Eve, when everything had to become opportunistic. That's when the thorns grew, that's when the teeth grew, and that's when the tusks grew, and all that stuff, and everything became opportunistic and, you know, in competition for resources. So they did eat each other before the global flood, but not at the time of creation. At the time of creation, nothing ate each other. There was plenty of biomass, like you said. Everybody was eating the vegetables and the fruit, which of course had were more nutritious and had everything that you needed. If you felt like eating an orange, an apple, you know, coconut or whatever, you had all the food value that you needed. You didn't need, because there was so much variety as well. You didn't need to eat anything else. But then, um, when Adam and Eve sinned, that's when they became separated from God, and all of creation was cursed. So it's been entropy from that day on, cut off from our Creator. How could so many sea creatures live in a small environment and be sustained by a vegan lifestyle? All creatures alive today are supersized. All the extinct animals are crammed into landlocked seas. Well, they were the ones living today are miniaturized. They're not supersized. Everything living today is smaller than what it was before the global flood. And we had, obviously, there was there was less water in the original creation, because a lot of the water was in the atmosphere, and or, somehow above that. But so it all rained down. But that's just animal biomass. Then you need the biomass for all the aquatic. Well, I mean, it's clear that there was a lot of biomass. There was a lot of plants, both in the seas and on land, and it was able to sustain a lot more animals. There was a lot more animals around before the flood than after the flood, and enough plants to sustain everything from megalodon to the anglerfish. Yeah, there was. Of course, there is a lot of area on Earth. If it were, because there was one, say, supercontinent, and then the rest was seas, or it was spaced out where you had all these different seas. But there was a lot of room for everything. I mean, there's a lot of room in the ocean. There's a lot of there's a lot of ocean where nothing is happening, where there is nothing going on. There's a lot as far as um, you know, space. There's plenty of space on Earth for to sustain everything in the original creation. Many plants can poison the water and kill. Yeah, today plants are opportunistic and they have poisons and they have this and that and the other thing, but but not at the time of creation and not before the flood. Everything was dependent on each other more. There's a lot far more land than there's water in the original. Well, that's the thing. There was probably more land, but what happened was is that the water caused the oceans to sink down more, and there was probably a lot more land, but then again, there's a lot of room for a lot more land because there's a lot of space. The ocean, half the world, all the continents, all of our continents are on one side of the planet. The other side of the planet is all ocean. It's all Pacific Ocean, basically, except for the tips of New Zealand and such that you might be able to see on the other side. But there's a lot of real estate. There's a lot of real estate for a lot of biodiversity going on. No overbust. But then again, see, Mr. Lizard, this is the point. You're you're arguing. Well, what if this was the case, or what if that was the case? But we're not talking about what ifs. We're talking about what we can know and determine, and we can know and determine that there was a global flood, and that life was much more diverse before the global flood than after the global flood. And yet, we're still able to survive with all the plants and animals that remain. But we have to be extremely resourceful to do that, to do so. If people were just thrown out in the woods as they are, most people would die because they wouldn't be able to survive. And a lot of people throughout history almost did not survive. You know, you have to be extremely resourceful to to survive without the help of the entire civilization and everybody doing their own thing. Okay, so no overabundance of oxygen would poison them. Well, no, but there wasn't a over because there was a lot of biodiversity. I mean, there's a lot of animals and because you have to remember that with a lot of plants, there's a lot of CO2 from the plants as well. I mean, so it's not just oxygen that's coming from the plants; it's it's CO2 that's coming from them as well. And it's just that on the whole, as a whole, on the whole, they produce more oxygen than CO2. But what I'm saying, you're saying, well, what if this and what if that? But there's no what ifs when we have the fact of the global flood in front of us, the fact of the sediment layers that buried the previous world and the biodiversity. We can see there's no question about it. There was biodiversity. There was lots of biodiversity. There was lots of plants and animals and and genetic niches where different animals could live. I mean, it's not a question of if and or maybe. We know that there was a much more diverse creation before the flood than after the flood. It's not a question of if and or maybe. Okay, creation. Okay, but because he's To say they would have all died is not the case, because we can see they all lived before the global flood. We could see that they were living before the global flood. Okay, doesn't matter if there's more CO2. It's not going to stop the oxygen from killing everything. No, no. Oxygen is there was more oxygen in the atmosphere. I mean, that's a fact. We know that for a fact. Basically, with laws of nature, this would happen. Everything was megafauna. We're all vegan. Like I said, at the time of creation, everything was probably vegan. But after the fall, they became opportunistic. They had to become opportunistic for the sake of the resources, the depleting resources, because that's when entropy began, was at the fall after the creation. So, see, but like I'm saying, it's not a if. Well, if this happened, then that would have happened, and if that happened, then life wouldn't be possible. It's not like that, because we know their life was possible, because we have the record in the layers of what was possible in the sediment layers. And we know when sediment layers were deposited less than 5,000 years ago. And we know the the names of every progenitor of every ancient civilization, which are the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. So it's not, see, that's what I'm saying. We are going by what we know. The YEC, the Young Earth Creationists, we are standing firm on what the facts are, because facts don't change. The global flood is not going to change. The fact that the global flood is never going to change. The biodiversity before the global flood is not going to change. It's never going to change. It's a fact. And the fact that we came from all the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah is a fact. That's not going to change. There are only enough Y chromosomes to go around for all the Japhethites, all the Hamites, and all the Semites. There's no there's enough Y chromosomes for everyone, and we can identify them. And I've identified 85 or 95% of every Y chromosome that there haplogroup there is to a specific people, particular people. I can name them all. I'm going to have to go through the sons of Javan, because the sons of Javan in the Mediterranean became different civilizations, known civilizations in the Mediterranean as well. Javan had like 6 or 7 sons. I'm not sure how many, and they all settled known places in Anatolia, Greece, and the islands of Cyprus and the other islands. They're known civilizations, known to have been descended from Javan because of their name, of course. So I'm still finding more evidence to prove that everyone is descended from the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. Okay, layers doesn't agree. The layers do agree with the YEC. Also, the layers don't agree with the model, because we have the layers, and the layers are evidence that's not going to go away. Layers can be formed, stagnant lagoon. See, you're saying what if and or maybe again. Don't care if you can name it. I would prefer you gave some sources of backup. What you say rather than the source is the known ancient civilization. We know there were Thracians, and Thracians came from Tiraz. We know Europe is Gomer, came from Gomer, and Gomer had 3 sons, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarma. We know. We're going by what we know. We're not making up things. We're not going by what we imagine or what we suppose or what we think might happen. We know we're going by what we know the facts are. We're not making up things. We have the facts on our side. And and there's, it's about time the scientific community, um, started coming around to what the facts are. And I don't, this is common. It's basically common knowledge. I don't need to put a source, and I make it simple for the layperson so that they don't have to go, looking at up everything. Besides, they're not going to learn anything from papers that are going by pre-existing assumptions or that they have, the biases that they have. Provide the sources. The sources are what the problem is, because the sources are the biased imagination, not based on fact. I'm giving you the facts. I'm telling you what the facts are. The sources are not going to have the facts, because you'll never find. You look up what I just said in this small video here. Try to find sources and information. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find it, because they're looking in the wrong place, because they have a pre-existing ideas of what they think the facts are, and they're going after those pre-existing assumptions. See, they're not going by sources or facts. They're going by based on their pre-existing assumptions. We're going by what the facts are. Common knowledge, facts, as far as disagreement. You merely state. Well, I'm stating. Disprove the existence of Thracians. Disprove the existence of Cushites. Disprove the existence of Egyptians. Disprove the existence of the European Gomers, descendants of Gomer. Disprove the the fact that Madai was in Europe and his descendants are in Europe to this day. Disprove it. Disprove that Madai is the progenitor of the Medes. Disprove that the Elamites are descended from Elam. Disprove that the Assyrians are descendants of Asher. Disprove that the Arameans are descendants of Aram. Disprove. See if you can disprove it. You can't, because that's the only evidence there is. It's the only history that we have. There is no other history. Disprove the existence of Meshach and Magog. You can't, because there are known civilization. There are known people that are living today. And disprove that Nimrod was the king of Shinar. You can't. Nimrod was the only Hamite in Mesopotamia. No. No, there's only the civilization, ancient civilizations only go back 5,000 years or less. That's what I'm trying to show or and present. Because Noah is the progenitor of his grandsons and great grandsons that are the ancient civilizations. That's what I'm trying to show. That's what I'm trying to get through people's heads. There is no other ancient civilization that's not from a grandson or great grandson of Noah. Doesn't exist. No, it's common knowledge. If I can find the evidence for the Y chromosome stuff, anybody can find it. The DNA is the science that backs up what I'm saying. The Ashkenaz is the R1A, because everybody should know about the Ashkenazi Jews that call themselves Ashkenazi, because they lived in the area of Ashkenaz, which is the R1A, even though Jews are J2s, or the Judaics are J2s, probably from King David. No, no. See, you got to listen to Standing for Truth because they're off on their estimations and on their genetic, um, what do you call it, mitochondrial Eve and their Y-DNA atom. They're completely off, entirely off because of their poor assumptions and mistakes and calculations and everything. So it's the peer reviewed stuff that's wrong. It's the peer review and the scientific stuff that's wrong because they have the assumption of deep time, and they're going by the assumption of deep time when deep time is not a fact. The fact is 5,000 years or less for every ancient civilization, 6,020 years for from the time of creation. Um, you're calling my bluff. I'm not bluffing. I've I presented the evidence. Now you have to go and discredit what the evidence is because you're never going to disprove the existence of the ancient civilizations of the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the Cushites, the Arameans, the Assyrians, the Elamites, the Medes, the the nations in Europe, which are Tiraz and Javan and Gomer. You're never going to disprove that. They're all descendants of Noah. And even the Neanderthals are descendants of Noah. Neanderthals are Japhethites, probably Tubal that got lost in Europe and became extinct because the ones that have more Neanderthal DNA are the Eurasians, which is all the seven sons of Japheth. Everybody descended from the seven sons of Japheth autosomally will have more Neanderthal DNA because they came from the same original family tree as the Neanderthals, even though they've mixed since then with other people. And the Denisovans or the Denisovans, I guess it's supposed to be a Denisovan because it was a female, I think. But anyways, the Denisovans, they are a mix of Hamitic and Japhethite. So, so with the Denisovan, you have the the Hamitic people being related to the Denisovans, or they have Denisovan DNA, and the Eurasian Japhethites, but not the Semitic people. So everywhere where there's less Denisovan influence is exactly where the Semitic influence is. So you'll never disprove what the facts are. You'll never disprove known human history. Never. You'll never get rid of the flood sediment layers. You'll never get rid of ancient history. Maybe talk. Maybe I should talk to Ron Matt, the guy who cuts out audio from streams and re-uploads it to make him look good, and the opposition bad, look bad, stupid. Well, they're going a different route. Matt and SFT are going the scientific route and the evidence, scientific evidence route, which is very technical. And I'm going for more for the general layman route, what a layman can understand and appreciate. But what they're doing is important too because they're going through the technical stuff with the scientists, all the scientists, and they'll say, well, it looks like this, that, and the other thing, but it looks more on the side of creation than it does deep time evolution. and which is true. The evidence does support, a young Earth and not deep time, not evolution, because evolution never existed at any time. Provide the known human history. Provide the known human history. No, they're going for the standing for dishonest. No, they're interviewing. They're talking to the scientists, and they'll have a discussion with any scientist that wants to. That's either brave enough or stupid enough to. Hello, heaven rules all. So why should the layman listen to you if you don't provide any backing? No, I'm the one providing the backing, the solid backing, which is known human history and known DNA evidence. That's the solid backing, and you can't refute that. You know, it's. Anyways, I gotta go. But it's been great talking to you, Mr. Lizard, again. Um, I gotta get ready to go to work probably. So God bless everybody. Take care and keep looking at the facts. Look at the evidence. Yeah, Dave McQueen is good too. And if you want to know somebody that should be respected, is John Mackay. That man is a man to be respected, and you need to listen to every word he says because he's like a sage. He's like an ancient sage. He knows a lot of stuff. So and there's a whole lot of it. And David McQueen does too. David McQueen has lots of experience and everything. No, John McKay, you need to respect that man. I'm telling you. Now, I've been around the world a long time, and if you want to respect somebody, you can respect John McKay because he knows a lot of stuff, and you listen to every word, and every word that comes out of his mouth means something, has significance. It's not without meaning or significance, as they would say in Portuguese, à toa. It's not without meaning. Okay, God bless everybody. I gotta go. I would love to stay, but I can't right now. So God bless. Take care.